If your washing machine stopped mid-cycle tonight, you probably wouldn't call anyone. You'd pull out your phone, search the model number, check the price of a new one, and start doing the math. There was a time when that wasn't the calculation. When a refrigerator failed or a dryer went silent, you didn't think about replacing it. You called the repairman, and in towns across America, he showed up. The appliance repairman, once a regular presence in American kitchens and basements, has largely faded from view. The reason seems simple. Replacing became easier than repairing. But that wasn't always true. For much of the 20th century, when a refrigerator stopped cooling or a washing machine refused to spin, you didn't replace it. You fixed it. This is the story of how that world worked and why it changed. In the 1950s and 60s, major appliances were serious purchases. A refrigerator or washing machine could cost several $100s, the equivalent of thousands today. These weren't casual upgrades. They were investments. When you brought one home, you expected it to last. And when it failed, you expected someone could restore it. The appliance repairman was part of that expectation. He worked out of a modest shop or warehouse, stocked with belts, motors, switches, thermostats, and service manuals. When something broke, you called. He scheduled a visit. His truck pulled into your driveway. He removed a back panel, checked a timer, tested a motor, replaced a worn belt or heating element. Most machines were mechanical. Their parts were accessible, designed to be serviced. You might watch from the kitchen table while he worked. He'd explain what went wrong, write up a reasonable bill, and before long the machine would hum back to life. Children would sometimes hover nearby, curious about what was happening inside the machine. A washing machine wasn't a sealed mystery then. Panels came off, gears were visible, belts could be touched. The repairman might explain what a motor did or why a timer failed. There was something reassuring about seeing the inside of things, about understanding how they worked. The repair wasn't invisible. It happened in front of you, and when the machine started again, when the drum began to turn or the refrigerator compressor clicked back to life, it felt less like a replacement and more like a revival. The same machine, the same familiar sound, restored. The entire economic logic of appliance repair rested on one fact. Appliances were expensive, and they were built to be repaired. Manufacturers published diagrams, parts were standardized, local suppliers stocked replacements, trade schools trained technicians in motors, wiring, and mechanical systems. There was an ecosystem built around maintenance. A refrigerator wasn't disposable. It was an asset. But that system depended on two conditions. First, that the cost of labor remained reasonable compared to the cost of the machine. Second, that the machines themselves were designed to make repair practical. For decades, both were true. Then two things happened. The first was complexity. Older machines made their problems obvious. A squeal meant a belt. A burning smell meant a motor. A leak meant a hose. The sounds and symptoms were clues you could follow. But as appliances became more electronic, mechanical timers replaced with control boards, switches replaced with digital panels, failure became harder to interpret. Instead of a worn belt, you saw a flashing code. Instead of turning a wrench, you reset a circuit board. The repair moved from mechanical intuition to digital diagnostics, and with that shift, it became less accessible, both to the homeowner and, increasingly, to the independent technician. Beginning in the 1970s and accelerating in the decades that followed, appliances became increasingly electronic. Components were soldered onto circuit boards instead of mounted with screws. These machines were often more efficient, more precise, quieter. But when something failed, diagnosing it required specialized tools and deeper technical knowledge. Replacing a worn belt was straightforward. Troubleshooting an electronic control board was not. And sometimes the failed component wasn't designed to be repaired, only replaced. The second shift was economic. Manufacturing moved overseas. Assembly became automated. Global supply chains drove costs down. By the 1990s and early 2000s, the price of new appliances had fallen dramatically relative to wages. If a repair cost $250, and a brand new washing machine with a warranty cost $450, the decision became less about craftsmanship and more about arithmetic. When replacement becomes only slightly more expensive than repair, or even cheaper, the justification for repair disappears. The shift was gradual, but relentless. Repair shops that once relied on steady service calls began to feel pressure. Parts for older models became harder to source. Newer machines used proprietary components. Excited and happy box retailers bundled delivery, installation, and extended warranties into a single transaction. Instead of calling the repairman, people called the store. Instead of waiting for a part, they scheduled a delivery. And slowly, the trucks with the hand-painted logos stopped appearing in driveways. But it wasn't only economics, it was cultural. When something costs a significant portion of your income, you treat it differently, you maintain it, you preserve it, you repair it when it falters. As appliances became more affordable, they became less emotionally anchored. They shifted from long-term investments to upgradable products. Stainless steel replaced enamel. Digital panels replaced dials, features multiplied, and expectations changed. For most of human history, if something broke, you fixed it. That was the default assumption. Over the course of a few decades, that assumption flipped. The change didn't stop at appliances. Furniture became modular. Electronics became sealed. Cars became software-driven. The idea of ownership began to blur. We started leasing instead of buying, upgrading instead of maintaining, replacing instead of repairing. It wasn't that people suddenly stopped caring. It was that convenience became the priority. Speed became the value. And repair, by its nature, requires patience. Now the default is replacement. The appliance repairman didn't vanish because his skills disappeared. He vanished because the system around him changed. Labor became more expensive. Products became cheaper. Designs became sealed and less modular. When the cost of labor exceeds the cost of manufacturing, repair stops making sense. And when repair stops making sense, the people who built their livelihoods around it begin to fade from view. There are still appliance repair technicians today. The trade hasn't disappeared entirely. In some places, demand has even resurged, driven by supply chain delays or renewed interest in repairability. But the neighborhood repair shop, the one that knew your model number and your street, is far less common. And what disappeared with it wasn't just a profession. It was a mindset. The idea that the objects in your home were meant to last, that they were worth maintaining, that they were part of a longer story. Today, when an appliance fails, it often leaves quietly, hauled away in the back of a truck, replaced by a newer version with more features and a fresh warranty. The exchange is efficient, but it feels different. There was a time when the sound of a toolbox opening in the kitchen meant something had been restored, not replaced. The appliance repairman may not be entirely gone. In some garages and small workshops, the knowledge still survives. Drawers filled with salvaged parts, manuals with grease-stained pages, technicians who can still diagnose a failing motor by sound alone. But they are fewer now, and the world that trained them, the world that expected things to last, is not the world we live in today. The world that made him essential has largely passed. Understanding why he existed and why he faded tells you something about the broader shift from a culture of maintenance to a culture of replacement, and about the quiet trade-offs that came with it. If you remember a repairman visiting your home, I'd be interested to hear what that experience was like. Was there a shop in your town? Do you remember the truck, the smell of oil, the sound of a motor starting again? Because sometimes, when we look at the things that disappeared, we're not just remembering machines, we're remembering a different relationship with the things we owned and the people who kept them running.